The ship floated in silence far from any sun, drifting between the stars like a ghost. The corridors were quiet, the hum of engines the only reminder that life still clung to the metal walls. For most of the crew, the day had ended hours ago. But for him, sleep never came so easily anymore. He lay on the narrow bed in his small cabin, staring at the ceiling. His hands were folded on his chest, but his mind was a storm. Memories of fire and screaming voices would not leave him. The war had been cruel, and though he was alive, sometimes he wished he had not been. Survival carried its own kind of punishment. Every face he had seen die haunted him in the dark. The ship's metal walls felt like a cage. He had fought for humanity, for survival, for the promise that one day they would no longer live under alien shadows. But victory was hollow when you carried the dead inside you. He turned his head to the side and saw the faint glow of the control panel. Numbers blinked. A reminder that time kept moving even when his heart wanted it to stop. And then, a sound, a soft knock at his door. It startled him. No one came to his room at this hour. The crew respected his silence. They knew he preferred to be left alone. Slowly, he sat up, his hand hovering near the panel to open the door. But before he could press it, the door slid open with a whisper of metal. She was there, a figure standing in the light of the corridor. Her skin shimmered faintly under the glow, a pale silver tone that marked her as not human. She was one of the allies who had joined them in the war, from a race that had once stood far above humanity, proud, cold, distant. Yet here she stood, inside his room, breaking every boundary her people normally held sacred. Her eyes were strange, large, glowing faintly blue, but tonight they carried no pride, no distance. They carried storms, pain, a deep sorrow that even he, with all his grief, could recognize. She stepped forward. The door slid shut behind her. Before he could speak, she reached for the strap of her dress. It was a thin garment, alien fabric that clung to her like mist. She pulled it from her shoulders, and in a single motion it fell to the floor. The silver cloth pooled at her feet like water. He froze. His heart pounded, but not with desire. There was something heavier in the air, something fragile. She was trembling. Her lips parted, and in a voice that broke like glass, she whispered, "Move over." The words hung in the room like a plea, not a command. For a moment he could not breathe. He was human, she was not. Their people had shared battlefields, but never this kind of closeness. He had seen her fight, had seen her cold and unshaken when plasma burned around them, and yet now she looked smaller, broken, stripped not just of clothing, but of every wall she had ever built around herself. He slowly shifted to the side. His body moved before his mind could decide. Something inside him knew. This was not about lust, not about passion. This was about survival. This was about two souls who could no longer carry the weight of loneliness. She climbed onto the bed without hesitation. Her body was warm, trembling as she lay down beside him. She did not reach for him in desire. Instead, she curled against his chest like a child seeking shelter from a storm. Her breathing was unsteady, her body shaking with silent sobs she refused to let out. He did not speak. He did not ask why. Words would break the fragile moment. Instead, he wrapped an arm around her, slow and careful, as if afraid she might shatter. For the first time in many months, his heart felt something other than grief. It felt the weight of another soul pressed against him, needing him, trusting him. Minutes passed. The silence was heavy, but different now. Not empty, but full. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, fast and uneven. She clung to him tighter, and for the first time he realized she was as broken as he was. Her people were proud, but pride had not saved them. They had lost, too. Worlds burned, cities turned to ash. Maybe she had lost someone she loved. Maybe she had lost everyone. He did not know, but in that moment it didn't matter. They were two survivors clinging to warmth in a galaxy that had grown too cold. His eyes closed slowly. The images of fire and screaming voices faded, replaced by the sound of her breathing. The grief was still there, but for the first time it did not crush him. It softened, shared between them, and as sleep began to pull him down, one thought remained. This was not the story of a human and an alien. This was the story of two hearts broken by war, finding strength in each other. For the first time in a long time, he was not alone. The ship kept drifting through the cold stars, but inside the small cabin the world had changed. For the first time in many nights, he did not wake with sweat on his skin or ghosts in his eyes. Instead, he woke to the soft weight of another body resting against him. She was still there. Her head lay on his chest, her silvery hair spilling like threads of light across his arm. Her breathing was steady now, no longer sharp or trembling. She had found sleep, and in her rest she looked almost peaceful. He lay still, afraid to move. His mind tried to understand what had happened. Why had she come to him? Why had she dropped every wall her people kept so carefully? Why had she chosen him? He could not answer. But as he watched her sleep, he realized something important. It did not matter. What mattered was that last night, for the first time, neither of them had faced the darkness alone. Slowly, her eyes opened. They glowed faint blue in the dim cabin, alien and beautiful, but heavy with sorrow. She lifted her head, met his gaze, and for a moment neither spoke. Words seemed too fragile for what passed between them. At last, she whispered, "Thank you." 2 simple words. Yet they carried the weight of galaxies. He wanted to tell her it was nothing, that he had done so little. But when he opened his mouth, his voice broke. Instead, he only nodded. She gave him the smallest smile, but it faded quickly. She pulled herself up from the bed, gathering the silver cloth that had fallen last night. She wrapped it around her body with slow, almost reluctant movements. He sat up too, watching her. There was a kind of grace in her every motion, but also a kind of pain, as though even standing took effort. "I should go," she said softly. He wanted to stop her. He wanted to say, "Stay." But fear gripped him. Fear that she had only needed him for one night. Fear that the connection between them would vanish with the rising of the ship's lights. Yet before she reached the door, she turned back. Her eyes softened and she spoke again. "I cannot sleep alone anymore." The words struck him like a blade and a balm at the same time. She was admitting weakness, something her kind almost never did. And in that moment he understood. This was not just about her. It was about both of them. That night was not a mistake. It was a beginning. The days that followed were different. They did not speak of what happened, not to others, not even to each other. But when the ship grew quiet at night, when the corridors went dark, she would come. Sometimes she knocked, sometimes she simply opened the door, but always she came. And always he moved over. They did not share passion. They did not share desire. What they shared was silence, warmth, and the fragile comfort of knowing someone else was there. In the daylight, nothing changed. She walked the halls with her proud bearing, a soldier of her people. He continued his duties, silent and strong, a soldier of humanity. To the crew they were the same as ever, 2 warriors bound by war. But in the shadows of night they were no longer alone. He began to notice things he had never seen before. The way her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. The way she stood too long in front of the memorial wall, where names of the lost were written in cold letters. The way her voice softened only when she was near him, and she too noticed things about him. The way he flinched at sudden noises. The way he avoided the mess hall, preferring to eat alone. The way his eyes carried ghosts when he thought no one saw. They were mirrors of each other. Different species, different worlds, but the same broken hearts. One night, as they lay together in silence, she finally spoke what weighed on her. "My world is gone," she whispered. Her voice was so soft he almost thought he imagined it. "The sky, the rivers, the cities, they are ash now. My family too." Her body shook as the words fell from her lips. She buried her face against his chest and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her as though his strength alone could shield her from the truth. He did not speak. He had no words to take away her pain. But in the silence she felt his heart beating against her ear. Steady and strong, and for her it was enough. Later, when the stars outside flickered through the small window, he whispered back, "I lost my brother, and my friends. I carry their voices every night." Her hand found his, fingers curling tightly. No more words were needed. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of shared grief, shared survival, and something growing quietly in the spaces between. Trust. Days turned into weeks. The war was not over, but the battles were fewer. The crew prepared for the next stage, and tension grew in the air. But he no longer carried his weight alone. When the memories came, she was there. When her nightmares woke her, he was there. Neither of them said what this truly was. It was not love yet, not in the way humans sang about love. It was not lust either. It was survival. It was the quiet truth that two broken souls pressed together could carry a burden that neither could bear alone. And though the galaxy outside burned, though the stars witnessed endless war in that small cabin, every night they found something the universe had almost stolen from them: peace. For the first time since the war began, hope began to stir again, small, fragile, but alive. The next morning, the ship hummed with life, yet the small cabin felt like another world. The sunlight, weak and pale through the small window, fell on the bed where they had slept. He was awake first, as always, staring at the ceiling. She lay beside him, still asleep, her breathing soft and even. He studied her face, so alien yet so human in its emotions. Her eyes, closed now, carried the lines of battles she had fought, the grief she had endured. Her mouth, relaxed in sleep, hinted at the gentleness she hid from the world. And in that moment he realized that he had begun to care, not just for her presence at night, but for her as a being. The door slid open gently. He tensed. Visitors were rare at this hour. But it was not the crew, it was her. She moved with her quiet grace, wrapped in the silver cloth of last night. "Don't you ever sleep late?" he asked quietly. She gave a small smile, one that did not reach her eyes. "I sleep when I can," she replied. Her voice was still soft yet stronger than yesterday. "You?" He shook his head. "Never. Not completely." She sat on the edge of the bed, legs tucked beneath her. "I used to sleep under my world's sky," she said after a pause. The night was calm, the stars steady. "I would sleep thinking everything was safe." He nodded. He understood. Humans once had worlds like that too. Worlds they had almost lost. "We had that too, now." His voice faltered. "Now it's gone." Her eyes met his, glowing faintly. "I thought I was the only one who carried ghosts," she said. "You're not," he said firmly. "I've carried them too. Every day." For a long while they sat in silence, sharing grief without words. No one else could understand this. Not the crew. Not the aliens who fought beside them. Only those who had survived the war. Only those who had lost everything could understand the weight they carried. Then, as if a fragile thread had been pulled, she reached for his hand. Her fingers curled around his, and for a moment neither spoke. The contact was electric, not in fire but in warmth, in acknowledgement that they were no longer alone. The days passed, and with each passing day their unspoken bond grew. She began to stay longer at night. Sometimes she would speak, sharing stories of her world, cities that floated in the clouds, rivers that shimmered in rainbow colors, forests alive with creatures that could sing. He listened, captivated, though his own world had known only dust and ash, and he, in turn, shared memories of his people. Tales of heroes lost in battle, of simple joys like children running through fields or the smell of rain on earth's soil. She listened with fascination, even with tears shining in her eyes. No one else on the ship understood them. Some were curious. Some whispered. But the whispers never reached them. They had created a small sanctuary inside the cabin, a place where grief could rest, where trust could grow, where two broken souls could heal. One evening, as the ship drifted past a field of distant stars, she spoke softly. "I feel alive again," she said. "When I am with you, I forget the war for a while. I forget that my world is gone." He looked at her, startled. He had never heard her admit such vulnerability aloud. "Alive?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "For the first time in years, I feel that I can still matter. That I can still care." He swallowed. His own throat felt tight. "I know that feeling," he said quietly. "I felt it last night, and every night since you came." For a long time they watched the stars. No words were needed. The silence was full of understanding, full of trust, full of something growing quietly between them, stronger than either had expected. But life on the ship was not calm. The next day alarms rang. Another alien fleet appeared on the sensors. A war was always near. The crew rushed to battle stations, preparing for the unknown. He stood at the window of the cabin, her hand finding his again. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice steady, though her body trembled slightly. He nodded. "We fight, together," and in that promise something shifted. It was no longer just about survival. It was about protecting each other, protecting the fragile peace they had found in one another. During the battle he fought with everything he had, but always in the corner of his mind was her presence, her hand, her trust, the bond they shared. It gave him strength beyond anything his human body could produce. When the battle ended and silence returned, he returned to the cabin. And there she was, waiting, Not in fear, not in sorrow, but steady and calm. She had survived. They both had. He sank onto the bed, exhausted. She sat beside him, not speaking. Instead, she took his hand, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "I need this. I need you." It was no longer about loneliness. It was no longer about grief. It was about connection, about two souls, alien and human, finding warmth in each other when the universe had offered only cold. And in that moment, he knew that whatever came next, whatever battles awaited, he would not face them alone. They had found something more than survival. They had found each other. The stars outside twinkled, indifferent to their struggles. Yet inside the cabin there was light, fragile, soft, but real, and for the first time he allowed himself to believe in it. The ship hummed as it glided through the endless darkness of space. Outside, stars burned cold and distant, but inside the small cabin, the weight of life pressed down heavier than ever. He sat on the bed, staring at the floor. Her presence was beside him, calm but alert, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. They had survived battles together. They had shared nights of silence, of grief, of fragile comfort. And yet the memories of what they had lost crept in quietly, like shadows moving across the walls. "I can't stop thinking about them," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "All the people we've lost. The cities, the worlds, the voices." Gone, she did not speak. Instead, she slid closer, pressing her head lightly against his shoulder. "I know," she murmured. "I feel it too. Every day. Even when I fight, I feel it. The emptiness they left." Her words were not sympathy. They were acknowledgement. She had survived loss too. And in that acknowledgement he found the smallest comfort. For hours they sat together, letting the ghosts of the past fill the room. Neither tried to chase them away. The universe outside demanded they fight, but here, in this small cabin, they allowed themselves to remember. She lifted her head and looked at him, her glowing eyes heavy but clear. "Do you ever wonder if we are the last of what mattered?" He shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "We're not the last. We're the ones who survived, and that means we still have a choice. We can be the ones who make the rest count." She studied him for a long moment, then gave a faint smile. "Even after everything, you still believe in hope?" "I have to," he replied. "If I don't, what's left?" Her hand found his, and this time she did not let go. "Then we'll hold it together, even if the universe wants to break us." Days passed, each filled with duties, drills, and the quiet tension of knowing another battle was always near. Yet every night, without fail, she would come to his cabin. Sometimes she would speak, telling stories of her world before it burned. Sometimes she would be silent, letting the warmth between them speak louder than words. He began to notice the small things about her, the way her lips would twitch when she tried not to smile, the way her fingers brushed his arm when she was nervous, the way her chest rose and fell when she slept, steady and slow yet alive. And she noticed him too. The way his jaw tightened when he tried to hold in his frustration, the way he tensed when she touched him, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her, even for the briefest moment. It was not love, not yet. It was something rawer, something born from survival and shared grief. It was trust, unspoken, unbreakable, and necessary. Then one night the alarms blared. Red lights flashed and the ship shook violently. The enemy had found them again. Panic and adrenaline surged through the corridors. He grabbed his gear and ran to the command deck, her following close behind. They fought side by side, their coordination seamless, their trust implicit. Plasma fired, alarms screamed, and yet through the chaos he felt her presence like a tether, grounding him. When the battle ended, silence returned. But it was fragile. The hull had taken damage. Several crew members were injured. And the enemy fleet was still out there, waiting, calculating. He returned to the cabin first. She followed moments later, exhausted, her armor smudged, her glowing eyes dimmer than usual. She sank onto the bed beside him, her head resting against his chest. "I thought I might lose you," she whispered. "You won't," he said, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Not while I'm alive. Not while we're together." Her hand found his face, fingers brushing his cheek. "Even if the universe keeps testing us?" "Yes," he said firmly. "Even then." For the first time, tears fell from her eyes, sliding silently onto his chest. He did not move to stop them. He let them fall. He held her closer. They had faced death countless times on the battlefield, yet somehow the danger outside felt smaller than the fear they carried inside. The fear of loss, the fear of loneliness, the fear of forgetting what it meant to be human or alive. They were both warriors, but tonight they were only two souls, fragile and broken, clinging to each other in a universe that had almost forgotten them. Hours passed. The alarms had stopped. The stars glimmered beyond the porthole, and yet in that quiet moment the weight of the past pressed down on them. They did not speak. Words would not do justice to what they had endured, what they had survived. Instead, they held on. And in holding on, they found strength. Not the strength of weapons or armies, but the strength of humanity. The quiet, stubborn resilience that no enemy could destroy. She lifted her head, meeting his gaze. I think I've forgotten how to be afraid," she said softly. "You haven't forgotten," he replied. "You've learned to survive. That's different." Her eyes softened and she smiled faintly. "Then maybe we can survive together." He nodded, pressing his forehead against hers. "Together," he said. In that small cabin, the universe seemed to fade. Battles, losses, and distant stars no longer mattered. There was only the shared warmth, the quiet understanding, and the fragile hope that maybe, against all odds, they could endure. For the first time in a long time, the shadows of the past felt lighter. Not gone, never gone, but lighter, and in that light they held on. The ship drifted through the black sea of space, but inside, tension hung heavier than any gravity. The alarms had stopped, but everyone knew another attack could come at any moment. Every crew member moved with careful precision, their bodies tense, their eyes searching the shadows. He sat in the cabin, staring at the ceiling again. His chest still ached from the last battle, but it was not the injury that weighed him down. It was the memory of almost losing her, almost losing the only connection that made life feel real after all the war, all the loss. The door slid open quietly. She stepped inside, her armor smudged with soot, but her eyes were bright, almost defiant. She did not speak at first. She merely sat on the edge of the bed, letting her hand brush against his. "I can't stop thinking about it," she said finally, voice low and trembling. "What if next time I don't make it back?" He turned to her, grabbing her hands in his. "Then we fight, together, always together." "That's the only way we survive." Her lips quivered. "You don't understand. It's not just the fighting. It's everything else, the emptiness, the loneliness, the memories of all we've lost. Sometimes I think I'm already gone." He shook his head. "You're not gone. Not while I'm here. Not while we hold on to each other." Her eyes glistened, the first tears of the day spilling silently. "And if I can't hold on?" He pulled her close. "Then I will. I'll hold you until you can." She rested her head against his chest, her body trembling. The war outside, the universe beyond, all faded into nothing. Here there was only them. Two souls clinging to what little warmth they could find. The next mission came suddenly. The sensors detected a hostile fleet closing in, faster than anyone had anticipated. The crew scrambled. He and she suited up, moving side by side, their bond giving them a quiet strength. As the ship engaged in battle, fire and chaos surrounded them. Plasma blasts tore through space and alarms screamed over the sound of engines. He fought fiercely, but his mind was never far from her. Every action, every decision, carried the weight of keeping her safe. She moved with unmatched precision, but he noticed her hesitation in moments that would normally have been instinctive. The hesitation that came from fear, the fear of loss. In the middle of the fight, an explosion rocked the ship, throwing both of them across the floor of the command deck. Sparks flew and the hull shuddered. Smoke filled the air, burning the lungs. He coughed, struggling to rise. And then he saw her, pinned beneath a heavy panel, eyes wide with shock, arm trapped under the metal. Her breathing was rapid, her body trembling. He reached her, his hands sliding under the panel, straining with every ounce of strength.
"Hold on,"
he shouted over the noise. "I've got you." Her eyes met his. Fear, panic, and something else, trust. She did not struggle. She allowed herself to be saved. With one final effort, he lifted the panel enough for her to slide free. She collapsed into his arms, shaking. He held her tightly, ignoring the fire and chaos around them. In that moment, there was only her. Only survival. Only the bond that had grown too strong to break. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. I thought I was gone." "You're not," he said firmly. Not while I breathe. After the battle, the ship limped into a safe zone, damaged but alive. The crew tended to their injuries, repairing what could be fixed. He and she returned to the cabin, exhausted but alive. She collapsed on the bed, her silvery hair messy, her eyes heavy with fatigue. He sat beside her, brushing a stray strand from her face. "You could have been hurt," he said softly. "I know," she replied. "And I was scared. So scared, but then I thought of you, and I knew I had to survive." He took her hand, holding it tightly. "You always survive." And we survived together. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the stars drifted endlessly. Inside, they found a fragile peace. A moment of calm before the next storm. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she said. "You won't be," he promised. "Not while I'm here. Not while we have each other." Her lips curved in a faint, grateful smile. "I believe you," she whispered. And for the first time in many weeks, they allowed themselves to rest. Not just their bodies, but their hearts. The war had left scars, and the universe offered no mercy. But here together, they found warmth, strength, and hope. It was fragile. It was temporary, but it was theirs. Hours later, as the ship drifted silently through the void, he held her tightly, thinking of everything they had survived. The battles, the losses, the loneliness, they had faced it all. And yet, against the infinite darkness, they had found each other. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, "we face it together." She looked up at him, eyes shining faintly. "Together," she echoed, and in that word, simple yet profound, the unspoken promise was made. They would endure. They would survive. And they would face the universe side by side, no matter how dark the stars might seem. Because even in the coldest, cruelest reaches of space, humanity, his heart, her trust, could shine brighter than any weapon. They had found something no battle could destroy. Each other. The ship drifted silently through the dark void, but inside the air was thick with tension. The crew had repaired what they could, yet alarms still lingered in the background, warning of dangers that could return at any moment. Every shadow seemed heavier, every hum louder. He sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Exhaustion weighed down his limbs, but his mind would not rest. Memories of the last battle played like fire in his thoughts. The image of her trapped under the panel haunted him. The fear in her eyes, the trust she had shown by letting him save her. That trust had changed something inside him, something he could not ignore. The door slid open quietly. She stepped in, still covered in soot from the battle, her glowing eyes faintly tired but alive. She closed the door behind her, her movements deliberate and careful. "You're awake?" she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "I can't sleep," he admitted. "Too many thoughts," she nodded, her hand brushing lightly against his. "Me too." They sat together in silence for a long time. Neither needed words. Their connection was stronger than any conversation, deeper than any explanation. It was built on shared survival, shared grief, and the quiet acknowledgement that they were not alone anymore. Finally, she spoke. "Do you think we can survive this?" Her voice trembled, fragile but determined. He turned to her, gripping her hands tightly. "We will. We have to. Together." Her lips quivered, and for the first time she let herself cry. Silent tears fell against his chest, and he held her closer. He did not speak. Words could not hold the weight of what she felt. He only stayed with her, strong, steady, a shield against the storm. Minutes passed. Outside, the stars continued their cold, indifferent dance. Inside, something warm and fragile was growing, stronger than fear, stronger than grief. Then the alarms blared again. Red lights flashed. The enemy fleet had returned, faster and more relentless than before. The ship shook violently as explosions rocked the hull. He grabbed his gear, pulling her close. "Stay with me," he ordered. She nodded, fear shining in her eyes, but trust shining brighter. "Always," she replied. They moved through the corridors, fighting side by side. Plasma fire ripped past them, the enemy relentless. Every move was synchronized, their trust in each other absolute. When danger came from the left, one covered while the other advanced. When a blast threatened to hit, one pulled the other back without hesitation. At one point, a hole opened in the hull, exposing the void of space. He grabbed her arm. pulling her inside just before the vacuum could reach them. She clung to him, eyes wide, heart pounding, and he held her as tightly as he could, feeling her breath against his chest. "Don't let go," she whispered. "I won't," he said, voice firm over the roar of the alarms and chaos. Together, they fought through the ship, saving crew members, patching breaches, and keeping each other alive. Every time he felt fear rising, her presence grounded him. Every time she trembled, his strength held her steady. Finally, after what felt like endless hours, the battle subsided. The enemy retreated, leaving the ship battered but intact. Exhausted, he stumbled back to the cabin, and she followed. They collapsed onto the bed together, bodies trembling from exhaustion. He held her close, his face buried in her hair. She rested against him, her chest rising and falling, still alive, still with him. "You're safe," he murmured. "I'm here," she whispered back, voice weak but full of trust. For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to rest completely, not just the body but the soul. The war had left scars, both visible and invisible, yet here, in this small cabin, they found something stronger than fear. They found connection. They found trust. They found warmth that the cold universe could never take away. Hours passed. Outside, the stars glimmered as if unaware of the human and alien hearts beating together in defiance of the darkness. Inside, the room was alive with a fragile peace. She lifted her head, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Do you know what this is?" she asked softly. He looked at her, exhausted and weary. "Yes," he replied. "It's hope." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Even after everything?" "Especially after everything," he said. They sat in silence again, holding on to each other as the quiet settled around them. The battles would come again. The universe would not relent, but they had survived before. They would survive again, and more importantly, they would do it together. In the end, it was not weapons, skill, or strategy that mattered most. It was the human heart, the stubborn, unyielding strength to care, to protect, to hold on when everything else demanded letting go. She pressed her forehead to his, and he returned the gesture. "Together," she whispered once more. "Together," he echoed, knowing that no matter what came next, they had found something the universe could never take: each other. Even in the black void, where stars shone cold and indifferent, humanity and the connection they shared burned brighter than any weapon, stronger than any fear. And for the first time in what felt like forever, they truly believed in tomorrow. The ship floated quietly now. The battle was over, the enemy retreating into the cold void. The crew moved with careful steps, repairing the damage, tending to the wounded, and whispering quiet thanks to the gods or stars that they had survived once more. He returned to the cabin, dragging his fatigue behind him like a heavy cloak. Every muscle ached, every nerve screamed for rest. And there she was, waiting, her silver hair messy, her glowing eyes tired but steady, her presence the only comfort he had left in the vast emptiness of space. She smiled faintly when she saw him. "You made it," she said, her voice soft, almost incredulous. "I always make it," he replied, lowering himself onto the bed beside her. He reached for her hand, holding it as if it were the most precious thing in the universe. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. "Even when I thought I was lost," she murmured, "you kept me alive." "I always will," he said firmly. No matter what. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The bond between them was stronger than anything else. Trust born of survival. Care born of grief, and warmth born of shared nights spent holding each other against the cold. Indifferent universe. Finally, she lifted her head, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Do you know why I came to you that first night?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "I could have gone anywhere," she said. "But I came to you because you were the only one who didn't hide your pain. You were human, and yet you carried grief the same way I did. And I needed that. I needed someone who could understand." He swallowed hard, realizing that in those simple words lay a truth deeper than any battle or victory. "And now?" he asked. "Now," she said, a small smile breaking through the fatigue. "I think I finally understand what it means to survive. Not just fight, but survive. With someone who cares. Someone who won't leave when the universe turns against you." He brushed her hair back from her face. "I'm not going anywhere. Not ever. You and I, we found something the stars can't touch. And that's enough to keep me alive." Her lips curved into a full smile, one he had rarely seen. And in that moment he realized it was not just trust or survival that bound them. It was hope. A fragile human hope, burning brighter than any star, stronger than any enemy. They lay together for hours, sharing warmth, silence, and the quiet certainty that they had endured the worst and found each other through it all. Days passed. The crew rebuilt the ship, repaired what was damaged, and tended to the wounded. The galaxy remained dangerous, but the shadow of fear that had once pressed on him felt lighter. He knew now that whatever battles came, he would not face them alone. She was with him, always. She too had changed. No longer just the proud, distant soldier of her people. She had allowed herself to feel again, to trust, to hope. The war had taken much, but it had also given something precious: connection. The kind that could not be measured in victories or losses, but in the quiet touch of hands, the shared gaze in the dark, the comfort of knowing someone else carried the same burden. One evening, after repairs were done, they walked through the corridors together. For once there were no alarms, no fights, no danger pressing on their backs. Only the ship and the crew moving silently, tending to their duties. They reached a small observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly before them, cold and distant, but between them warmth burned bright. She reached for his hand, entwining her fingers with his. "I never thought I'd feel this," she said softly. "I thought the universe would take everything from me, and yet, here we are, alive, together." He squeezed her hand, smiling faintly. "The universe can take much, but it can't take us. Not our hearts, not this, not what we've built." Her eyes glimmered. "We've survived everything. The war, the loss, the fear, and we're still standing. That's human, isn't it?" He nodded. "Yes, that's the best part of being human. To endure, to rise, to care even when it hurts, to keep fighting, not just for survival, but for each other." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Then we'll keep fighting," she whispered. "Together." "Together," he echoed. The stars outside continued to shine cold and distant, but inside that small observation deck, there was light, fragile and human, but unbreakable. They stood together watching the endless galaxy, hearts beating in silent defiance of the void. The war had tried to break them. The universe had tried to crush them, yet here they were, alive, connected, and unafraid, because humanity was more than survival. It was resilience. It was hope. It was the stubborn, unyielding ability to care, to trust and to love, even in the darkest corners of space, and she, alien, proud, and once alone, had found that humanity too. Together, they faced the void, not as soldiers, not as survivors, but as two souls who had discovered the greatest power of all: connection. For in the end, the stars could not touch them. The darkness could not reach them, and the universe, vast and indifferent, had no answer to the force of two hearts standing together against it. They were alive. They were together. And nothing, not battle, not loss, not distance, could ever take that away.